A few years ago, my partner and I were living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our days were typically filled with the usual routines, and our interactions with the neighbors were pleasant but not overly friendly. We'd exchange nods and pleasantries whenever our paths crossed, but that was the extent of our connection with them. One neighbor, in particular, stood out in our memory, a man of about 40 who lived in the house next to ours. One crisp morning, my partner awoke with a perplexed expression on her face. She turned to me and said, "I had the strangest dream last night." Curiosity piqued, I urged her to share the details. "In my dream," she began, "we were at our neighbor's house. He had invited us over for dinner, along with his parents. The dream was peculiar because we had never shared more than a passing greeting with this neighbor. Yet, in the dream, everything felt remarkably pleasant, though undeniably strange given our lack of familiarity with him." As my partner recounted the dream, it took an even stranger turn. Towards the end of the dream, she continued, our neighbor excused himself from the table and went to the garage to work on his car. We both found the dream odd, but we didn't dwell on it for too long. Dreams can often be a chaotic blend of our subconscious thoughts and experiences, and we thought little more of it at the time. Several days passed, and life continued on its usual course. Then, one evening, I returned home to a scene that sent shivers down my spine. Our neighbor's house was swarming with police officers and forensic investigators. As I approached, a detective approached me and politely requested my cooperation in answering some questions. It was then that I learned the shocking news. Our neighbor had been found dead in his garage, and it was no ordinary death. He had taken his own life by running his car's engine with the garage door closed, carbon monoxide poisoning. The detective explained that the authorities had been alerted when our neighbor failed to show up for work and did not answer his phone. To make matters even more unsettling, they determined that he had been dead for approximately 3 days by the time he was discovered. My partner and I were left in a state of shock, grappling with the eerie coincidence of her dream. In her dream, our neighbor's car and garage had played a prominent role, and now it seemed that her subconscious had somehow foreseen the tragic event. The neighborhood was abuzz with talk of the incident, but we kept our knowledge of the dream to ourselves. It felt too surreal, too otherworldly to share with anyone. How could we explain that my partner had dreamt of a neighbor's death just days before it occurred? As the days turned into weeks, the incident continued to haunt us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we had been connected to our neighbor in some inexplicable way, even though we had never been more than casual acquaintances. We began to wonder about the mysteries of the human mind, the uncharted territory of dreams and premonitions, and the inexplicable bond that had formed between us and our neighbor's fate. We searched for scientific explanations, trying to rationalize what had happened. Some suggested that my partner's dream could have been a random occurrence, a mere coincidence in the vast tapestry of human experience. Others ventured into the realms of the supernatural, proposing that perhaps there were forces beyond our understanding at play. But for us, it remained an enigma, a story we shared only with each other, a secret connection that defied explanation. Time passed, and the memory of that strange episode gradually faded into the background of our lives. Our neighbor's house was eventually sold to new residents, and the neighborhood returned to its usual quiet routine. Yet, even now, when I glance at that house, I can't help but recall that eerie dream and the uncanny twist of fate that had entwined our lives with our neighbors in a way we could never have imagined. It's a reminder that the human mind and the mysteries of our existence are far more complex than we can ever truly grasp, leaving us with questions that may forever remain unanswered. "8 years ago, I was just a 10-year-old boy, and my world was shaken to its core by my grandmother's battle with severe dementia. What had once been a gentle, forgetful, and occasionally moody woman had transformed into a stranger in her own body. Her descent into the depths of this debilitating disease was nothing short of terrifying. One fateful day, the unimaginable happened. It's a memory that still haunts me, as vivid as if it occurred yesterday. Our home had always been a place of warmth and comfort, but that day, it turned into a scene from a nightmare. My grandmother, with a distant and vacant look in her eyes, had been sitting quietly at the kitchen table. It was a rare moment of calm amidst the constant confusion and agitation that seemed to envelop her. My younger brother, not fully comprehending the severity of our grandmother's condition, approached her with a simple request. "Could you pass me that butter knife, Grandma?" he asked innocently. Up until that point, we had never encountered any issues when asking her to do small tasks. Yes, she was forgetful, often losing track of time or repeating herself endlessly, but she had never exhibited extreme behavior. We had always treated her with patience and love, understanding that her actions were a result of the cruel disease that was stealing her mind. But on that day, everything changed. As she reached for the butter knife, I watched in horror as her grip tightened around it. Her once frail hands were now surprisingly strong, and her eyes took on a sinister glint. Without warning, she lunged at my younger brother with a chilling and deliberate intent. My brother, a reflexive instinct saving him, managed to dodge her assault just in time. Panic surged through me, and I frantically searched for something to defend him. My eyes landed on a nearby chair, and I lunged to grab it. What followed was a heart-pounding, gut-wrenching minute of sheer terror. My grandmother, once the matriarch of our family, now wielded that butter knife like a weapon, her every move aimed at my brother's life. We dodged and weaved, the chair serving as our only barrier between life and death. In that surreal and nightmarish moment, it was as though my grandmother was possessed by some malevolent force. She showed no recognition of us, no flicker of remorse or hesitation in her relentless pursuit. Her eyes remained empty, devoid of any hint of the woman she had once been. Just as suddenly as it had begun, the attack ended. My grandmother, seemingly satisfied with her efforts, calmly placed the knife back in the drawer and resumed her previous, vacant demeanor. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and she had returned to her own world, leaving us trembling and traumatized in the aftermath of her madness. My brother and I exchanged bewildered glances, our hearts still racing, and a chilling realization settled over us. We were just children, facing an incomprehensible and terrifying situation, and we had no idea how to navigate it. This horrifying incident was just one in a series of nightmarish episodes that marked my grandmother's descent into the abyss of dementia. She had been run over by vehicles on 4 separate occasions within the span of a year. Each time, she had attempted to escape from our house, driven by an insatiable urge to find someone or something that only she could see or understand. The toll on our family was immeasurable. We had to constantly supervise her, making sure that every window and door was secured, knowing that a moment of distraction could lead to disaster. It was as though we were living in a war zone, constantly on high alert, never knowing when the next crisis would erupt. One particularly devastating incident involved her flooding our entire house. She had forgotten, as she often did, that she had turned on the tap in the bathroom. The water flowed unchecked for hours, seeping into every corner of our home, causing irreparable damage to our belongings and leaving us with a sense of helplessness and despair. Despite the chaos and heartache that dementia had brought into our lives, we clung to the fragments of our grandmother's former self. We would see brief glimpses of the woman she once was, moments of tenderness and recognition that pierced through the fog of her deteriorating mind. These moments were bittersweet, reminders of the person she had been and the cruel fate that had befallen her. Dementia is a relentless and unforgiving disease. It strips away not only a person's memories and abilities but also their sense of self. It robs them of their dignity and leaves behind a shell of the person they once were. As family members, we grappled with a complex mix of emotions: compassion, frustration, grief, and, at times, even anger. But beneath it all, we held on to our love for her. We knew that the actions she took were not a reflection of her true character but rather the result of a disease that had taken control of her mind. Our journey through the harrowing landscape of dementia was a testament to the strength of our family bond. We leaned on each other for support, finding solace in shared experiences and a shared determination to provide the best care possible for our beloved grandmother. As the years passed, my grandmother's condition continued to deteriorate. She became increasingly distant from the world around her, lost in a labyrinth of confusion and forgetfulness. It was a painful and heart-wrenching process, watching her slowly slip away from us. Despite the challenges and the horror that dementia had brought into our lives, we remained committed to ensuring her comfort and well-being. We sought the guidance of healthcare professionals and joined support groups to gain insight and coping strategies. We understood that this journey was not one we could navigate alone. My grandmother's story is a stark reminder of the devastating impact of dementia, not only on the individual but on their entire family. It serves as a call to raise awareness about this relentless disease and to advocate for better resources and support for those affected by it. In the face of the chilling and often incomprehensible actions of dementia, we held on to our humanity, our compassion, and our love. It was our way of honoring the woman my grandmother once was and finding strength in the face of a disease that sought to rob us of everything we held dear. One fateful Friday night, as I lay on the couch, my wife was fast asleep beside me. She had been struggling with sleep, recovering from a stubborn sinus infection that just wouldn't let go. I had decided to tiptoe my way to our bedroom, leaving her undisturbed on the couch. Our couch was snugly pushed against a wall, just beneath a large window, and it had become our cat's favorite spot to watch the world outside. To ensure her furry friend enjoyed the view, my wife often remembered to leave the blinds cracked open just enough for the curious feline. Our house was elevated slightly off the ground, a characteristic of the neighborhood. I'm a fairly tall guy, standing at 6 feet 4 inches, and when I'm at ground level outside, I can barely peek in through the window. This detail would prove to be a significant factor later in the night. As I made my way to bed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief for my wife, hoping she would finally catch some much-needed rest. Little did I know that our night was about to take a terrifying turn. Our cat, a mischievous little ball of fur, had a habit of walking or sitting on the back of the couch to gaze out the window. It was a routine we had grown accustomed to, and it usually brought us some amusement as we watched her react to the outside world. In our effort to ensure her nightly entertainment, we kept the blinds slightly open, allowing her to peer out into the night. As I settled into bed, the house was quiet, and my wife was fast asleep on the couch. I had just begun to drift into a deep slumber when an unexpected sound startled me from my sleep-induced haze. It was a noise I had become somewhat accustomed to, the familiar rustling of the blinds as our cat poked and prodded at them, trying to get a better view of the outside world. In my half-asleep state, I instinctively rolled over and lazily swatted at the back of the couch behind my head. It was a gesture meant to shoo away the feline troublemaker. A simple action that usually resulted in her ceasing her mischief. But this time, the sound didn't cease. Instead, it grew more pronounced, and my sleepy mind registered something unusual about it. It was no longer the gentle rustling of the blinds but had taken on a different, more ominous quality, a metallic, scratching sound. It sent shivers down my spine. Still groggy and disoriented, I opened my eyes, trying to make sense of the situation. I sat up, then stood, turning to face the back of the couch where I had been swatting moments ago. In my dazed state, I fully expected to find our cat persistently messing with the blinds in some strange new way, disrupting my wife's restful night. But what I saw when I turned around was far from what I had anticipated. My heart raced as my eyes met those of a stranger. It was the face of a man, illuminated faintly by the moonlight filtering through the window. I could only see from his nose up, and his eyes widened with shock as our gazes locked. Time seemed to stand still for a moment, suspended in the eerie silence of the night. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. This was not our cat. It was an intruder, and he was trying to pry open our window. The realization hit me like a freight train, jolting me into action. I made a noise, a guttural, instinctual sound that conveyed both my fear and my intention to protect my home and my wife. It was enough to startle the intruder. Without a second thought, he abandoned his nefarious task, turned, and bolted away into the night. My heart pounded in my chest as adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could hear my wife stirring on the couch, roused by the commotion. I yelled for her to call the police as I hurriedly made my way to our bedroom, where I kept our firearm. The sense of urgency was overwhelming, and I couldn't afford to take any chances. As I retrieved the weapon, I could hear the distant wail of sirens drawing closer. My wife had acted swiftly, and the authorities were on their way. We both knew we had narrowly escaped a potential disaster, and a profound sense of gratitude washed over us. The police arrived promptly, and we recounted the harrowing ordeal to them. It turned out that our home had not been the only target that night. The intruder had broken into several other homes in our peaceful neighborhood, leaving a trail of fear and stolen possessions in his wake. In more than one instance, he had entered homes and prowled around, taking advantage of the peaceful slumber of unsuspecting residents. The audacity of his actions sent shivers down our spines. Had he successfully entered our house through the window, he would have landed directly on top of my wife, who was sleeping on the chaise. The knowledge of how close we had come to a potentially tragic outcome weighed heavily on us in the days that followed. It was a stark reminder of the importance of home security and vigilance. We knew we had been lucky, but we also knew that luck alone could not protect us. In the wake of the incident, we took immediate steps to bolster our home security. We installed additional locks on our windows and reinforced the vulnerable points of entry. Security cameras were placed strategically around our property, and motion-activated lights illuminated the darkest corners of our yard. We also reached out to our neighbors and proposed the idea of a neighborhood watch program. It was an opportunity for us to look out for one another and to ensure that our community remained a safe haven for all residents. Building a sense of camaraderie among our neighbors was essential. We got to know each other better, exchanged contact information, and pledged to keep a watchful eye on our surroundings. It was a collective effort to deter any future threats and to ensure that our homes remained secure. Despite the trauma of that night, we found solace in knowing that our quick thinking and the support of our community had prevented a catastrophe. We kept our valuable possessions secure, invested in a safe for important documents, and made a habit of locking doors and windows, even when we were at home. Our home had become our sanctuary once more, a place where we could rest easy, knowing that we had taken every precaution to protect ourselves and our loved ones. The incident had been a stark wake-up call, a reminder of the importance of home security and the power of vigilance. It was a night we would never forget, a night that had changed us in profound ways. We had emerged from it stronger, more resilient, and with a newfound appreciation for the safety and security of our home. We were determined never to let our guard down again, to ensure that our haven remained impenetrable to any would-be intruders. In the end, the darkness of that night had given way to the light of a strengthened resolve, a commitment to safeguarding the place we called home. And as we stood united with our neighbors, we knew that together, We would protect our community and ensure that such a terrifying ordeal would never happen again.